Hi guys, it's Friday. It's Down and Dirty Woodscraft. Stay with me. Okay, today guys, when I'm taping this, the tropical depression has just rolled over me. And so everything is, we still got bands of rain coming through, and you're going to hear, thunder, you're going to hear vehicles, you're going to hear a neighbor's got his generator running in case we run out of power, Nothing bad, just bands of rain. And pretty soon I'm going to post a video where I'm going to talk about hurricanes, tropical storms, and things like that. But we'll get that another day. Today what we're going to talk about is a piece of vintage kit. A little bit of the history and why it can be a good set if you want one. But you're going to have to hunt. Okay? Now the kit we're talking about is this kit. You know it as a Boy Scout mess kit, but that isn't exactly what this is. Let me tell you a little bit of the history of where this kit came from. There's a bit of a mystery and a bit of a little bit of vagueness what happens at where it started at. The starting point that I've been able to find is a reference during the beginning of the American Civil War to someone coming forth to the government with this idea of a mess kit for soldiers that would be a cook kit, mess kit, etc. And they looked at it and were very polite, but basically said, there's a war on and we ain't got time to do that, and that's way too much for the average soldier. Apparently then they went to the British right immediately after the American Civil War, and there was some units that may have got this. Now the British, being an empire, was different than America. And one of the things was you could have basically a rich guy, nobility, purchase himself a commission and make himself an officer in the British military, and then use his own money to raise a force, a personal unit of say up to 1,000 men. And this would then be used we would think like National Guard or something like that, and they would be a such and such force that would serve within the empire in some capacity. Quite often these units could be completely outfitted, uniforms, weapons, everything, by the rich guy who was forming it. He'd form it for a few years, they'd go off to India or wherever there was a conflict, spend a couple of years, then come home, disband everything, and here's my medals and that type deal. And so there was a kit very similar to this used by the British auxiliary forces or some of these pre-made up forces. And it appears that there was some version of this that was utilized. Immediately after the American Civil War, you had the Indian Wars continued. This had started prior to the Civil War, and you had a lot of units out west that were fighting the Comanche and the Riccara, the Kiowa, all of those tribes we remember from the Western movies. And then when the war ended, they went back out west. Well now, as you remember from a lot of those John Wayne cavalry movies, you had our, leader at the front and the detachment of cavalry following behind him, and maybe a single wagon following up that was the supply wagon. That's a bit of a historic, misnomer. In actuality, where were those troops going to sleep? You just going to throw your saddle down, throw a blanket on you? That works in Hollywood, but in real life, if it's raining or cold or whatever, they needed tents, they needed supplies, they needed a cook, they needed food and supplies to keep an army in the field. Yeah, you might have a patrol that'd be going out 48 hours or something that might do that sleeping on the ground bit, but for the most part, it wasn't done. And with the Indian Wars, there came about a lot of irregularity because, the Apache and etc. traveled vast distances. As one famous person from that day said, they were the finest light infantry in the world. They traveled by horseback, and they would do just ridiculous distances every day. And so the U.S. cavalry, trying to chase them, had stripped down to bare bones. And quite often, due to river crossings or whatever, or just territory where wagons couldn't go, they were forced to abandon the wagons and have the wagons leapfrog ahead to try to meet them and things like that. It was in this mindset that the earliest I can show a kit like this in military service was showing a display in a museum of United States Cavalry. Not regular Army, but Cavalry may have been issued one of these sets, because it gave the troopers a wider variety of cooking options. Because at that time they only issued food thing, and I will put a picture of it here, was a meat can, and that is this. The meat can looked a lot like one of our World War II ammo cans, but it slid together, and you were issued a ration of meat and flour or cornmeal per day. And that was normally like corned beef or dried meat or whatever, and you would go up and get your supply, and you'd wrap it up, put it in your haversack, and at the designated your turn to meal time, you would cook it however it was. So each of the individual soldiers or groups were pooling their resources and trying to cook for each other. Well, you needed more than that can, and so guys were putting plates and whatever into their saddlebags, taking up a lot of room. Enter this kit. Now this kit is heavy. This is not the Boy Scout kit you're used to. We're going to go over this kit entirely in just a couple minutes. But this kit is very heavy. In fact, putting my scale on a couple minutes ago, it's a little over 2¼ pounds. For that weighs as much as some of the ultralight sleeping bags and whole tent sets. This was riding in a saddlebag, but it gave the individual soldiers a greater opportunity, because flour or cornmeal, they could make biscuits with this, they could make tortillas with this, they could make bannock with this, they could make whatever. They could also cook, fry, boil, stew, whatever. Especially whenever you got several guys and you put a couple of logs, or dig a trench where you put the fire in it and set them across the top of the edge of the trench. It allowed multiple guys to heat up. This guy takes care of the horses, these two guys are going to take care of that, this guy's going to set up the tent, your turn to cook. And so you cooked for everybody, right? And it gave you the opportunity to cook individual meals pretty easily. Now, this did not stay in service very long. In fact, the information that I've been able to roughly find, that was one of very few sources. If you got more sources, please leave them in the comments. I'd appreciate it. Was that somewhere around 1877 till about 1881, 82, something like that, is when this was cavalry, and not to all units, but it was like an alternate issue into cavalry. After that, they went to this type of thing. Now, this is a World War I mess kit that you're already familiar with. But the 1884 or 5, I believe it was, issued looked a lot like this. Slight variations in the materials, but this design, this clamshell, of the top is a lid, and then the bottom is a pan that snaps closed. It's simply that. And then in World War II, right thereabout, we upgraded the one that we're more familiar with, that has this enlarged compartment on top. So you could say that it's sort of like that it was that early can, this mess set, replaced by this mess set, which was much lighter and allowed the guys to still cook and stew and fry and etc. with a lot less effort. And then this, by World War II, still allowed it. Now, in today's military, we don't think much about that, because you're issued MREs and meals and stuff ready to go. That wasn't there back in them days. And so, when I was a small boy, there were some elderly family members and friends of the family around me that often they would be telling me about their daddies had fought in the Civil War, their granddaddies had fought in the Civil War, the Indian Wars and things like that. And as a young man, I was just thrilled by such stories. And I can remember one such story of an individual who had talked about they had became so sick of onions because they'd been in the cavalry in the 1870s, and they had been in the cavalry in the Civil War, and then they'd re-enlisted in the U.S. Army Cavalry after the war and gone out west chasing Apaches and things like that. And he said that a lot of times when they'd get resupplied, because you'd run low, and so you'd have to break off pursuit and go to that little outpost, that town, that train area where you can get supplies and try to get something sent to you. And when you come in this little small town, you're not here for a week, you're here for a couple hours. And you got to get back on that trail. And it was whatever food stuff they could find, and something that shipped fairly well was onions. And so, you know, the locals, when they heard the cavalry's coming, they hid the stuff because, you know, they're going to want everything. They're going to just give you a slip of paper to turn into the government and say, you know, hey, I owe, you know, for a barrel of onions. So they'd have barrels of onions. And so he became sick of having to cook onions and hardtack and potato or whatever, because that's what they do. They'd give you your rations and then you had to prepare them. Okay? Now, today, let's look at this vintage kit. Now, why am I bringing this up? It's because this is actually a very good kit, but this is not the common Boy Scout kit that you're used to, that I started out with. And a lot of times we'll go buy the one like you see at Walmart or whatever, that cheap thin aluminum, and it is a terrible piece of kit. The thin aluminum heats up really fast, it scorches food, things stick to it, you burn more unless you're an expert at managing your heat, and it's just not a good kit. But this kit is made out of steel, and that's a big difference. Now I'm going to change the camera angle where you can see it more in detail. Let me break this kit apart and show you the contents. Okay guys, here is the set. Now, this is not aluminum. This is actually sheet steel that's been tinned. Okay? Now, we unscrew, swing around the handle. And we got a wing nut right there that we tighten back up to produce the handle. On the top we have the mixing bowl. Now this is not no lightweight piece of nothing. You could pay them for gold for this, but this makes a good mixing bowl for mixing. Remember, they got issued flour, so cornmeal and flour. I can make biscuits, I can make tortillas, I can make whatever in here. This is for the mixing and the big plate of stew type deal. Next up we have the Stewpot, and that is a good size Stewpot. Again, sheet steel. It's been heavily tinned. Tin cup. Now this is a small size cup, but it's, you know, about probably close to an actual cup in drinking things. At the time that this was being used by the military, you got to understand, you had a canteen full of water for drinking. This was like a ration of coffee. You know, the special break where you've been drinking nothing but water all day for the, you know, this is your chance of meal to get soup, tea, cocoa, coffee, whatever. And so that was a ration, so to speak. I bet it was strong enough to stand an egg up in, so that was probably more than enough coffee. You then have the lid, which is again heavy, and notice that it's recessed, which means you can put coals on it for baking. This also has other uses. Now, my unit has an extra piece to it that does not come, and that's this. This is actually a second skillet that someone removed right there, removed the handle, and it made a plate to go with this one. This is actually sheet steel, and I have seasoned both it and the skillet so that it is actually, you know, seasoned. That's the reason. This is a sheet iron steel skillet. And let me show you that compared to a similar size skillet I have. Okay. Here is my cool handle sheet steel skillet. You can see they're virtually the same size. The only difference is the handle. And they're both the same thickness sheet steel skillet. So carrying this is exactly like carrying that. But this has advantages over that. And let's go into that. Now, as you can tell, that is a skillet for frying. Okay? it's also this. You can take this heavy bowl, turn it over the top, bring around and lock the two together, and then like this or like this. This would be better. You can put it into the coals and bury it in coals and use it like a Dutch oven and bake within this. Okay. You can also utilize that lid. Remember that lid is recessed? The lid turns upside down in here and acts as a spacer. Now I can put bread or something on that, sit this again up there and lock it together and set it on a fire, a low fire, and let it bake like that. And this is the baker then, and so I'm using it like a Dutch oven to bake breads, you know, treats, whatever, or even meats. I can bake like this and broil and roast them that way. So it's not just a skillet, it's also part of this Dutch oven like system right here. Okay. Also, if this is going to be used in a chow line for military application, you take this screw out. Now, you ever wonder why this wasn't just riveted, where you just turn the handle? It's a wing nut. There's a reason for that. You take this wing nut off, you take the handle off and you turn it upside down and put it back in position. And this has got a square hole and a round hole. Now I put the square hole, the nut back in there like that. Put it in there like so. Spin it down with the handle upside down. Now what this is for is you lock this in there and you put your hand here and held it. This is how you went to the chow line. That way I could just stick my hand out and I could slop food in there to two different compartments and carry it back. One hand, nice and easily balanced, and so I could eat out of either pan without having to sit down or have a table or whatever. So for going through a chow line, that's what this was for. This is a well thought out kit. Now remember, you were issued bread. You were issued flour that I could turn into biscuits. I roll it out, and I mash it out, and I take a skillet, take my bread that I've made in here, hand knead it and flatten it out in here, and then use the cup to cut out biscuits. Remake the dough, cut out another biscuit. See what I'm saying? Lots of different tips and tricks of how all this could be incorporated together to do several different things. It's really a well thought out kit once you stop associating it with the aluminum modern version. And this, like I said, was a military type kit. The military type idea, once they had probably took them up as surplus, you know. Now, the Boy Scouts of America, the Boy Scouts of England actually first got started, and they were using military surplus gear, and these kits come up. Now, this kit goes all the way back to the 20s. I can't find where the Boy Scouts ever issued anything but this type of kit for use in their stuff. And I've got the copies of the earliest Boy Scout manuals and etc. And it's always this type of kit that's being utilized. Were they using military surplus? Remember the cavalry had these. Were they picking up military surplus cheap and having them just mark on the handle up here, Boy Scouts? Oh, I almost forgot. That slot right there, that's so you can run a stick in here for reaching out on big fire. It's also the hand fork and spoon could pass there and bind up, so you could use it like a handle when you're going through the chow line and keep from dropping your fork. Pretty simple, huh? Simple and easy piece of kit, but for a one-person do-it-all cook set, one of these steel ones like this has many advantages. I can use it as a Dutch oven and bake. I got a stew pot. I got a skillet. I got a mixing bowl to mix and create other things. I can then use that as a big eating bowl if I want to, for whatever. Modern time I can use it for a salad bowl or whatever. The little bitty coffee cup can be used to actually sit in the middle and put food around and cook two different things, with the cup in the middle having a vegetable and some sort of other thing around in the skillet or the thing while I'm cooking, all at one time. It's a multiple use kit and really should get more respect than it is. It's just because the later 1960s and on Boy Scout sets are made out of that cheap aluminum. That's what kind of ruined it for us. If this was made out of some sort of modern material that could give such a good cooking ability as like the steel skillet in this, still bake and still everything else, I think it'd be a great winner. Problem is, once you make it heavy enough to do a good job, it becomes too heavy to carry. The same problem it had originally, but compared to carrying a big huge chuck box full of Dutch ovens and stuff like that to cook with, this was super light. So, as you can see, this kit is not your standard Boy Scout kit. And so, as I showed, it's the same as carrying this little skillet. So it gives me the ability to fry, mix, make biscuits, make breads, do soups, do stuff, seal it up, and then use that like a Dutch oven and put it in the coals and bake with it. It's a very, very useful kit. And I've been very happy with this. I was kind of educated by an old scout that I did many years ago, probably about 2010, 2011, something like that. Not long after I started my channel, I did a video about mess kits. And he brought up that maybe I didn't have a good mess kit, and that he was an old guy who had been a Boy Scout when he was a boy, and he had several of these kits, and him and his grandson, who is now a Cub Scout, were watching my videos. And so he gifted me this set. And he was right. It is a good cook set to take to a base camp, to take and cook and prepare meals for one person, or maybe for two, depending on it. Yes, it works very well for that, but it's not a backpacker. It's so heavy. This would be into the canoe, into the truck, into the bottom of a pack when I'm building a base camp and I'm going to be here for several days. Yeah, that would be when I would lug this much weight, but it's way too heavy for just a backpacking trip. I'd rather tote something much lighter, okay? And so that's where this advantage is. Now, like I said, getting one, you're going to have to go on the Amazon, you have to go on eBay. And you're going to have to look for it. Educate yourself what the original metal ones did. You can still find them. I've done some searches not terrible long ago and found them still available, where individuals will put them up. And they're going to be pricey, 40, 50 bucks. But they can be a very good one kit for one person set to utilize in your camping and in your cooking. Okay. Hope this gave you some ideas, guys. Sorry this was such a long-winded, unusually long for a down and dirty, but this was a piece of kit you got to go into to see the beauty of it and the advantage of it and the use of it, especially when we're talking about setting up our kits. Hope you enjoyed this, guys. Please do me a favor and hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And leave any comments or questions down below. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.